Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that this story, of course, is very personal to me. It's also very special to me. And when I was growing up, I read a book by Tamara Pierce called Daja's Story. And it was about an orphan girl, it was a fantasy story. And one of the lines in that book really struck me, Dave, at that young age. And it mentioned how her people believed that the moment you forget about a loved one is the moment they truly die. So Daja had created a whole shrine to her family, and she lit incense for them every day of her life because she wanted to make sure that her family knew that they were still alive in her heart. And that's really stuck with me. I believe, just not to get deeply religious on you, but I truly believe that Emily is out there and that she, appreciates or is aware of the fact that she is still alive to me. And every person I get to share her story with who truly is entertained by this story. This is not a sad story. It is a genuine, epically fantastic urban fantasy story. And anyone who gets to meet Emily in its pages, I believe she becomes that much more alive. And that is what's truly meaningful for me about sharing this book with you.
Okay, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have a great guest with me, like every great guest on the podcast, but this guest is an expert in IT. Headphones, connecting to the call today. This person, if you need any IT help, I have a new contact for you. Darcy's here, and Darcy Murphy is she does everything, but the biggest thing is author extraordinaire here on Living the Next Chapter. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm so excited to be here. I'm doing really, really well. We're having some mild weather here in Kansas, only about 15 degrees.
Well, that sounds balmy where I am. Here in Canada, we have about, maybe an inch of snow. And it's so cold that you go outside and your fingers freeze in about a minute. And you can't feel your fingers, like nothing. So that's fun. So I would love to switch places with you so much.
Well, at least you got the snow, because all we have is dead grass out here, which isn't quite as much fun.
Well, the nice thing is you don't have to shovel dead grass. That is a point. So there you go. That's amazing. Welcome to the podcast. Can you tell everybody a little bit about you? And I'd love to get into your author journey to kind of set the stage, because there's a lot to talk about today. So let's start with your author journey. How did all this start for you?
Yeah, thank you. So I was telling stories to my younger siblings from the time as long as I can remember, probably 8 or 9 years old. I have 5 younger siblings, so I think my parents appreciated the help having me tell them stories. And it didn't really go anywhere. I published a few poems in high school, and I wasn't really solid as an author until I hit 14. And then a very important woman in my life, my godmother, Melissa, she asked me one day, "What do you want to be?" And I kind of thought about that for the first time, and I gave it a lot of thought, and I realized that I didn't really enjoy anything but reading books. I was a total bookworm. Anytime you wanted to find me, all you could see was my eyebrows because I had my nose buried in some book. And in kind of despair, I went back to Melissa and I said, "I don't think I'm good at anything except reading." And she was like, "Well, you could be an editor." And I was like, "No, that sounds so boring. You have to stop every sentence or two to correct something. That didn't interest me." And so she said, "Why don't you try taking the stories that you've always told and writing them? Instead of reading, become a writer." And that opened a whole new world to me. I'd never even thought before. For some reason, it had never occurred to me that these ideas I had could actually become a book someday. And so that got me started. And I was lucky to have her support because my parents kept telling me this wasn't a real job. And so I was really, really blessed in that way. to have Melissa in my life from the early years and support me. And then when I was 18, my middle sister, Emily, was diagnosed with cancer. And over the next 6 months, my parents divorced. My sister, Emily, passed from cancer. My boyfriend cheated on me. And then my dog died. Dave, it was like a bad country song. And
Wow.
honestly, I was devastated. My whole life had been torn apart in just 6 months. And of course, I had just turned 18. So to me, it was like, wow, is this what adulthood is like? I want to go back to being a child. It was really, really horrible. And I decided at that time that I had to, support my family. So I ended up moving out on my own, starting a successful business. And I kind of had to put my dreams on the back burner. I had a scholarship to go to college that semester. I ended up giving that up, and just do my best to financially support my family. And so one day I was with my little sister before she passed. She was on hospice care and I was rubbing her back and I was all choked up. I was really experiencing the loss in that moment. And I asked Emily, what can I do? What can I do? Give me something I can do to help you. And she murmured to me, she said, Sarah, I want you to write a book and I want to be the main character in the story. Will you tell my story? And of course, I just lost it at that moment and I just started crying. Years later, I was, finally starting to kind of recover, bring my life back together. And I realized that it had been nearly 10 years since I promised Emily I would write that book, and I never had. So I'm very excited to be finally putting Emily's story out there.
Wow. So these were the book is based on stories that you would tell your siblings. Where did the idea for the stories in the very early days, where did these ideas about these stories come from? It sounds like you're a very creative thinker and you're a dreamer and you're creating a whole world that you would share with your siblings. Where did all this come from, or just your imagination?
Yeah, I actually grew up in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, near Golden, Colorado. And in Golden, there is a pretty world famous hiking trail and biking trail called the Enchanted Forest. So for me, being a bookworm, I grew up reading Tamara Pierce stories, Mercedes Lackey, some of the greats when it comes to fantasy with strong female heroines. And so, already having that experience and that immersion in fantasy world to then be next to, within walking distance of, a world-class hiking trail called the Enchanted Forest, you can imagine how much creativity I was able to come up with through that. So this story tells the tale of an older sister and her younger sister, Emily, who get lost inside the Enchanted Forest and find their way into a magical kingdom.
Okay, so I have to ask this as you talk about this Enchanted Forest. When was the last time that you physically walked the paths of the Enchanted Forest in person?
I would say it's been about 2 years. My family still lives near there. Even though I'm out here in Kansas, I travel a lot. So I've had the opportunity to go back many, many times, and it's a beautiful place. Even if you didn't have a background in fantasy, I think anyone could get inspired by that hiking trail. It's beautiful.
Was this a place that was meaningful for your sister as well?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, in the early years, I would resent her presence more than I should have. Being the older sister, I wanted to get away and, dream and have my hike alone. And she would often kind of be my tag along. But as we got older, we definitely enjoyed hiking there together.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your sister? I'd love to know a little bit more about her as well.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about her. Emily was beautiful. Honestly, that's the first thought that comes to mind. I'm a short, kind of extra curvy, brown hair, brown eyes. Emily, being my half sister, was blonde, blue-eyed, tall, gorgeous. Even with 9 years apart, you could just tell she was going to be everything that any girl wishes she could look like growing up. So I think there's a bit of jealousy between us growing up just because of that. But she was also kind. I would get my allowance every week and I would blow it on either food or books, right? Emily always donated hers to different causes, like save the whales, save the wolves, save the this, save the that. She was very, very attuned to nature. Anytime I wanted to watch cartoons, Emily always wanted to watch Animal Planet. She loved animals. And in fact, one time when she was a little girl, she was about 6 years old, we had a room in our house that was called the playroom, and aptly named because it had all of her toys. And she would often play in there because, again, there was a big age gap between us. So, she often played alone. And one time I was walking by the playroom and she goes running out of the playroom at top speed and climbs the stairs and runs to her room. And I'm like, what's going on? And so I kind of stood there curiously watching her. She runs back like in 0.2 seconds, having stripped and put on a Disney princess gown, runs back into the room. And then I hear this soft crooning sound, like she's kind of singing or humming a song under her breath. And so I walk into this room to see what is going on. And the playroom had floor to ceiling windows. So you could see out into the aspen grove right outside our home in the Rocky Mountains. We were up in the mountains, right? And so I walk in and there she is in the corner, her face pressed up against the glass. And on the other side of the glass, Dave, was a fawn and a baby deer lying down next to each other. And here is 6-year-old Emily, blonde hair streaming behind her in her Disney gown, having called the wild animals to her with her song, and it was just such a classic Emily moment. I will never forget that.
Wow. And maybe the deer were coming back to say thank you for donating to us and helping us because you like to donate your money. And thank you. And that's such a Disney moment. I feel like breaking into song.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Okay.
And I really think that just perfectly epitomizes everything Emily stood for. And I've really tried to bring that same connection to nature into the story. I don't want to give away any pieces of the story that a reader might, hope to read, but believe me, there is an element of that in this story, and I think readers are going to really like that.
So one of the characters, would you say it's the main character, is based on your sister then?
Yes. In fact, the character's name is Emily, and she is one of the main characters in the story.
So you're paying tribute to your sister. And the reason I was asking a little bit to kind of give us more information about your sister, a little bit more about who she is just that I think it does help kind of flavor the character for us as readers, that we're going to understand the character in a little different light than if we didn't know as much about her. So thank you for sharing that. That's a very personal story, so I appreciate you doing that. I just think it adds a little bit of another layer to the character that people are going to enjoy even more knowing that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that this story, of course, is very personal to me. It's also very special to me. And when I was growing up, I read a book by Tamara Pierce called Daja's Story. And it was about an orphan girl. It was a fantasy story. And one of the lines in that book really struck me, Dave, at that young age. And it mentioned how her people believed that the moment you forget about a loved one is the moment they truly die. So Daja had created a whole shrine to her family, and she lit incense for them every day of her life because she wanted to make sure that her family knew that they were still alive in her heart. And that's really stuck with me. I believe, just not to get deeply religious on you, but I truly believe that Emily is out there and that she, appreciates or is aware of the fact that she is still alive to me. And every person I get to share her story with who truly is entertained by this story. This is not a sad story. It is a genuine, epically fantastic urban fantasy story. And anyone who gets to meet Emily in its pages, I believe she becomes that much more alive. And that is what's truly meaningful for me about sharing this book with you.
See, and that is why I have a podcast. And that is why I have amazing authors on my podcast. Because, Darcy, to see your book on the shelf or on Amazon or wherever it's going to be, and in a sea of other books, without having a connection with you and understanding this and everything we've talked about so far, what draws me to the book out of maybe curiosity, but now that I hear this, I'm eagerly awaiting this book because I already feel like I'm part of the story. You've brought me in and I know something now. I'm coming to the book with some knowledge. You've got my heart engaged. I'm ready for this book. And I think you were mentioning the book is coming out mid-February, so it's not going to be long, and this is going to be a reality for us. Can you talk about the book launch and kind of your plans for this? And besides podcasting, promotion-wise, what are you planning?
So this book also contains a small love story. It's the story of Alicina and her hero. And so beyond everything that Emily means to me, I wanted to release this book on Valentine's Day because it is a love story. And I think that around that time of year, we have two groups of people that might enjoy this book. One are fantasy readers who are just looking for their next good read. And, this one definitely delivers all the tropes you might be hoping for in a young adult fantasy. But there's also people, I think, who jokingly celebrate Singles Awareness Day. People who have been rejected in the past or who have had their own troubles with love. And around Valentine's Day, we can feel sad, right? We can feel alone. And I love this story because it's about a young woman who learns self-respect, learns to move past her mistakes that she has made that have hurt other people. And she learns to love and to accept that other people might not be perfect, but they can still be perfect for you. And that you may be broken inside, but you're still worthy of love. So this book is coming out mid-February because of that Valentine's Day connection. And so I'm planning a Galentine's Day party. If you're not familiar with Galentine's Day, it's the day before Valentine's Day where you celebrate your girlfriends. And so a bunch of gals who are friends of mine, as well as some of the aspiring authors that I have connected to through my charitable work, through Shut Up and Write. They are all coming together, and I'm going to throw them a big Galentine's Day bash, and we're going to celebrate the release of this book. So I'm very excited for just a couple weeks from now.
Okay, I love your segues. You are so good at these. Can you talk about Shut Up and Write? Because first of all, I love the name. That is such a great name. Can you talk about this charity? Because we've talked about it and you've captured my attention with this. I want to promote this and share this with the world. Can you please fill us in on this charity, please?
Yes. So in the last 2 years, because of COVID and everything that's been happening, I actually sold my home in Oregon and have been traveling quite a bit. I have an online business, so it was possible for me to kind of get out and see at least the US part of the world. I haven't gone abroad recently, but, and so I wanted a way to keep myself accountable to finishing this book and other stories that I was working on. And so I went to meetup.com and I found a group called Shut Up and Write. Shut Up and Write is actually a registered nonprofit. It was started by a man who was just like me, struggling to hold himself accountable to finishing his book. And so Shut Up and Write is a nonprofit organization, and they help aspiring writers to finish, publish, and promote their fiction or nonfiction works. So no matter what writing project you're working on, if it's fantasy, if it's sci-fi, if it's horror, or if it's a memoir, a self-help book, they help you to do that. So I was involved in the one in Florida while I was there for a while. I was involved in the one in Maine and then in New York. As you can see, I've traveled a lot recently. And so when I came to Kansas, I looked to see if they had a chapter here. And I found that they had 200 members in their chapter until COVID hit. And after COVID hit, obviously it shut down. And there wasn't really anything anymore. And so I contacted the nonprofit group and I said, hey, I've had wonderful success attending these meetings. I would be happy to take over as the organizer for the Kansas City one, because now we're settled down. We own a home here. And I was like, I'm putting down roots. I'd love to participate. And so now every Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. in downtown Kansas City, I volunteer as the organizer for Shut Up and Write. And we have anywhere from sometimes it's 2 or 3 people show up to one time we had as many as 30 and I was, scrambling to find chairs. And all we do is we just shut up. We literally close our mouths and we write silently for 1 hour. And then after that hour is up, we talk about our project. We ask questions if there's anything someone needs help with. And my role in that, since I am a published author, award-winning, internationally acclaimed published author, is my job is to help them with the craft of storytelling. If they have questions about plot or dialogue or characterization or world building, my job is to help them figure out how to publish. Are they going to want to go traditional? Or are they going to want to go the self-publishing route? And to help them promote their book, which is why, Dave, I told a lot of them about you.
Okay, so I have a question. I have my hand up. Being a charity, is there any way for people to donate to the charity? And if so, how do they do that?
Yeah, if you want to donate, you can go to shutupandwrite.com. They do accept donations. And like I said, we also have a whole slew of volunteers. I donate my time. And the donations help us to find venues for these events and to get the word out. And of course, to support all of the wonderful resources that Shut Up and Write has on their website for aspiring writers. They help with editing. They help with just direction. They have a blog on where you can ask different questions like, how do I structure my book? How do I get started? How do I come up with a good idea? Things like that. So donations are very, very appreciated.
Okay, so we'll have that information in the show notes. So Darcy, I need you to just to kind of hold here for a second because I want to talk to the audience. So I'll be with you in a second, okay? For all of our past guests on Living the Next Chapter, all 135 of you, thank you for being on the podcast. To the publishers that have been sending your authors to the podcast, I'm talking to you for the moment. Darcy, again, I'll be with you in a second. I'm asking for you, authors. Some of you are very successful and you're further down the line. I would love and challenge you to give back a portion of some of your sales to this charity. And publishers, I'm talking to you. I would love to see you make a donation. And if you make a donation, I would love for you to include the name Darcy in your donation, some way. Just to acknowledge Darcy and all of the great things that are happening. I'm asking everyone. And if you're listening and you're like, I would love to do this, go to the show notes and click the button and make a donation. Okay? Darcy did not ask me to do this, by the way. She's just looking at me like, what are you doing? But yes, I'm asking everyone, all my past guests, all the publishers and our listeners. I've never asked for anyone to donate anything to anybody until now. And I think this is something that we can all do to encourage the next generation of writers. And Darcy, I'm so with you on this. So yeah. So there you go. Well, you're back. Okay, Darcy, is that okay? I did that?
Yes. Thank you so much. I have to say the reason why I give my time is because I have really found that when I first started writing and decided I wanted to become a published author, this was long before social media, right? And there was no resource. There really wasn't. There was nowhere I could go to learn to do this. And over the last few years, many different writing coaches and selfpublishingschool.com and all kinds of different platforms have grown to help authors, but a lot of them are expensive. So, I think selfpublishingschool.com is a wonderful platform, but they do charge thousands of dollars for their program. And so most of us are starving artists. and I think it's important for something like Shut Up and Write to exist, because who knows, right? Where the next J.K. Rowling will come from, or the next Game of Thrones, like these stories that we love, that we crave, that to some degree have changed us, right? I don't know about you, Dave, but growing up in a family where as the oldest, I sometimes got the least attention unless I was the squeaky wheel at that time. But having books to turn to when things went wrong in life, right? Having characters to teach you how to deal with situations that maybe you were too embarrassed or too afraid to tell your parents were happening to you in your life. Books were my first friends. They were certainly my first boyfriends. Right? I learned how to choose them. I learned how to pick good friends. I learned how to pick good guys from those books. And I think if we can, as writers, not only write characters of that level, right, where someone might fall in love with that character as a friend, or like I said, as a book boyfriend, but also if we can inspire others, who knows what changes we could make in society if we had books of good moral character, and define that however you wish. In my books, I always like to make sure there are people of color, because I hate the fact that so many fantasy stories are just a bunch of white people all talking to each other. And I can say that because I am a white woman, right? But I tell you, even I get sick of it. I'm like, this is not what it was like. The Moors, and again, Dave, I'm going off on a tangent here. Rein me in if you need to.
No, I love it.
But the Moors are the ones who brought civilization to Western Europe. The Moors were Black men. They were people of color. They were educated. They had technology that these druids who were like wearing, 2 strips of cloth and painted themselves blue up in England, right? Like they did not have that technology. They did not have that level of sophistication. And it was the Moors who brought that. So to imagine a fantasy world based off of medieval England that is only full of white people is total BS. So all I'm saying is you take your own values and you put them in your story. So if I can inspire even one more author to take their own values and put them in a story and have that story be read by young adults, I think that gives my life meaning.
I think you just defined passion for us with what you just said. That was the textbook definition of passion.
Well, I am very passionate. I'm not going to lie. I've been a human rights advocate for, going on 17 years now. I actually have my own nonprofit organization I started, which is called Match, and it's making advocacy the force for change in human rights, because I've seen what discrimination and racism can do. And I have many, many, many friends among the people of color, and I have found that without a voice, their talents go to waste, And a lot of them have found their own voice. They don't need me to come along and save them. But if I can, again, educate youth on what their human rights are and how to advocate for them, how to stand up for yourself without violence, that is what I'm all about. So yes, I will admit there is a thread of that woven into my stories, but again, these books are here mainly to educate, not to educate. These books are here mainly to entertain, not to educate people. So pick up the book if you're looking for a good read. And, you know, if I subliminally turn you into an anti-racist, that's just a benefit.
Win, win, win all the way around. I like it. So, okay, so what have you learned about yourself in this whole journey from the promise made many years ago to February 14th, a few weeks? In that whole process, what have you learned about yourself, Darcy?
Wow. I mean, obviously I've learned a lot of things about myself in the last 10 years. I would hope I had. Yeah. But I think the writing process in particular really taught me that it taught me a few flaws. You know, it taught me that I am quick to judge myself. I am quick to put myself down. And I had to learn how to overcome that in order to finish the story. It's also taught me the value of a community. You know, I volunteer for Shut Up and Write, and it's true, I do my best to give value every time I show up, but that community gives me a lot of support too. I've had aspiring writers who taught me things about the craft of storytelling that I didn't know, that they had read on some blog or read in some book that I had never come across. And so it truly is a collaborative effort. It takes a team to write a book. And it can be a very lonely journey if you don't connect with your readers throughout the process. So I learned the value of connecting with readers and making sure that they are a part of the process. I have a Facebook group called the Darcy Murphy Book Launch Team. It's invite only. But the members inside that community, they participated in choosing the cover for this book. They participated in helping me word the book description for Amazon. You know, they have been very participatory and contributing to what was done. And I really appreciate that. So I think that I also learned gratitude. Not that I wasn't grateful for my life before, but I am ultimately more grateful for the community and support that I have found by becoming an author. And that's truly, truly special to me.
So I can anticipate the answer to this next question, just so you know, but I still would like to hear it. Do you believe in your heart that Emily is proud of you and of this book?
I don't know if she's proud. I honestly don't know. You know, we had a lot of rivalry growing up, and I know at the end she told me that you know, she really loved me a lot and wanted me to do well. So I think that she would probably my hope is that she would know how much I love her by reading the book. It's not necessarily about making her proud because she was my younger sister. You know, I wasn't necessarily setting out to make her proud, to be honest. I was setting out to make sure that she knows that she's never going to be forgotten. I would like her name to become a household name, just like Harry Potter. I'd like little girls to grow up wanting to be Emily just as much as I grew up wanting to be Hermione Granger, you know? So I hope to make her immortal, but I don't know that I necessarily think that she would be proud. I think that if I were to save all the whales, she would probably be proud of that. But that's not a talent I have. So I'll stick with what I know I can do.
And maybe a couple deer as well. That would be good.
Absolutely. Save the rabbits for sure.
Yes. 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 You have that Disney moment all over again. Darcy, it's so good to have you on the podcast. And you've given me like 35 links to put in the show notes today, which is awesome. And we want to make sure we list them all for everyone so they can go and find the book on the 14th, Valentine's Day, around that time, to support the charities that you've mentioned and support the next generation of authors. You have a heart for not just your story, but everyone else's story. And that shines through, Darcy. And I'm proud to have you on the podcast just to shine the light on the great things you're doing and your desire to see people write and succeed. That's something that I'm proud of. So I'm proud of you for that. And I really have enjoyed having you on the podcast. I'm looking forward to my copy of the book. Just so you know, I am looking forward to this, and I can't wait to find out more about Emily as well. So you being on the podcast just made my day. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I can't wait to see your face when you take a picture of my book next to Niagara Falls, because that's just really cool.
Consider it done. It will be done, and I will do it with pride that I had the chance to have a conversation with the great author of the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing that copy in the mailbox. It's going to make me smile.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everyone, please go to the show notes. Please support Darcy and the amazing book that she's got coming, and be there in line. Just like you line up for like Black Friday and you stand outside freezing to save money on a TV, how about you stand in line for this book and be there when it's ready for you? And let's support Darcy and the great stuff you got going on. Thank you, Darcy, for being part of the podcast.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Okay, well, thank you for being here on Living the Next Chapter. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We enjoyed having you here on the podcast. Our authors are amazing. I hope you appreciate their time, their effort to make this possible. If you know an author, if you want to recommend an author, that's a good idea. Hey, if there's an author that you really would love to hear about or hear from, if you tell me, if you send me a message, you speak pipe on our website, livingthenextchapter.com, send me an email, go over to livingthenextchapter.com, send us a message. We will forward your message to that author and say, listen, you are being requested to be on Living the Next Chapter. Our audience can't wait to hear from you. You can help shape the show. Yeah, you. You could do that right now, actually. You got a minute, right? Okay, how about you do that? livingthenextchapter.com. I'll see you over there. Recommend an author. Yeah. See ya. Thanks.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.